how's everyone doing today? Hope you're all having a beautiful day. It's a little bit dry here in Sydney, so I'm a little bit itchy, an allergy today, and a bit of a cough, and I think that's not the COVID cough, it's an allergy cough. I need to get a t-shirt to say it's allergies. Hope you are all very well. So today, let me just close that down. So today I'm going to be talking about ovulation. I'm going to be talking about the impact ovulation has, particularly when it goes awry, when it's not working for you, and how that can have an impact on your fertility and on your moods, and just how you are leading up to your period after ovulation. So I want to run you through, you know, what can go wrong in an ideal world, what it should look like, and just some signs and symptoms to look out for, because I don't think women realize if they're not ovulating and what signs to look out for. And we can still have our period even if we're not ovulating correctly. So I want to talk about that, and then I want to talk about a few of the three main kind of impacts on your ovulation in terms of your health and how you can support ovulation and support your hormones and general health. So if you have any questions, just pop them below and I will get to them afterwards. So in an ideal world, we've got this menstrual cycle. It's 28 days, for some women 34, for some women 26. So it does chop around depending on your cycle, depending on your overall health, depending on what's going on for you. But in an ideal world, you have your day one, the first day of your period, and that might last for about 5 days. And then from day 5 to 15, 4 to about 15, day 14, you have your proliferative phase. This is when you've got follicle stimulating hormone, and this kind of stimulates estradiol. It stimulates the follicles. This is the hormone that some women might take when they're having IVF, or they have to stimulate just to get the eggs, the follicles sort of interested before that process. And during this phase, estrogen actually rises to its highest. So all the hormones are pretty low during day 1 to 5 during your menstrual cycle, except for testosterone. So if you have any testosterone dominance, those symptoms might come out there. Your hormones will be pretty low, and then as follicle stimulating hormone ramps up, that also ramps up estradiol, and that takes you up to ovulation. And at ovulation, for most women, around day 14, but again it can vary, day 10 to day 16, but around that day 14 you have what's called the luteinizing hormone, the LH surge. And now this is one of the ways that women can check if they're ovulating. They can do the little pee sticks and it will tell you the LH surge, and this is a day when you're most likely most fertile and you might get pregnant. So ovulation, you have that surge, you might have some egg white discharge, you might have a little bit of temperature peak, and then what happens is you get your ovulation and the egg drops, and then that forms into what's called a corpus luteum. And in the ideal world this happens, and then that corpus luteum actually stimulates progesterone. So both progesterone and estradiol are prevalent through the luteal phase, which is the 2 weeks before your period. But progesterone more so, the corpus luteum is producing a lot more progesterone. And so the progesterone is kind of peaking. Estradiol is kind of still high, but it's leveling out. And progesterone is more dominant. So as these hormones rise, you have this kind of like bell curve of estrogen. And then with progesterone, up to about day 17, so 14, 15, 16, 17, so about 3 to 4 days after ovulation, you then have this peak at day 17. So keep note of these peaks and have a look at how you're feeling during these peaks. Like, how do you feel when luteinizing hormone's peaking? How do you feel on day 17, 18 when progesterone's peaking? If you feel really anxious, if you feel kind of heightened, if you feel a bit off, or if you've got insomnia, that can mean progesterone's not peaking. If you feel more extremely depressed or extremely tired, that could mean you're actually a little bit sensitive to progesterone due to high insulin, due to just your sensitivities to hormones. So this is what should happen in an ideal world. You've got this beautiful luteal phase bell curve of estrogen that then drops during your period, and then you've got this gradual increase in progesterone that peaks at around day 17 and then starts to drop. then by around that kind of 26, 27, 28 days, those hormones have dropped out and fallen, along with the luteinizing, the FSH, which have fallen. And then during your period, the follicle stimulating and the luteinizing began to rise as well. So that's it in an ideal world. So in an ideal world, you will get symptoms, and you will get some mental and emotional symptoms. Maybe a little bit more fatigue. Maybe you'll want to sleep a little bit more. Maybe you won't feel like doing as much exercise. Maybe your brain is just a little bit fuzzy. But it's these extreme symptoms that we want to look at. And there's three main things that can impact ovulation, because if ovulation isn't happening, you're not getting that nice progesterone bump. And so what happens is that depletes your progesterone, as well as stress can deplete your progesterone. That gets depleted and that leads to a lot of symptoms, but then it can also lead to anovulation, which is no ovulation, or even a longer cycle. So your cycle, instead of being 28 days, your cycle is 40 days or 45 days. So not having that full ovulation will deplete progesterone. Now, obviously, one of the biggest things is being on the oral contraceptive, because the oral contraceptive, you don't get that ovulation. And so over time, that will deplete your progesterone. But that can be supported, and you do need to support your system. But in terms of your general health, one of the biggest things when it comes to problems with your ovulation are thyroid hormone levels. So if your thyroid hormone levels are a little bit under, even just a tad under, that lowers your metabolic rate. And our metabolic rate is vital for the release of the egg. And if the egg isn't getting released, it's not turning into that corpus luteum, and then it's not producing progesterone. And what's interesting is it's progesterone that supports the thyroid. So then you've got this vicious cycle of a slightly underactive thyroid, maybe due to stress, maybe because you're sensitive to gluten, maybe because you're low iodine. But then the progesterone reduces because you don't have the ovulation, and then that impacts and that just compounds the low thyroid. So the hormones lower slightly, TSH keeps rising, and as TSH keeps rising over a number of years, it could be anything from 3 to 10 years, TSH is rising, those thyroid hormones become less active in the body, and you start getting those kind of low thyroid symptoms that can be no ovulation, fertility issues. Now, what's interesting with low thyroid is if you're not getting that ovulation, it's depleting your progesterone, but you're still likely estrogen dominant. So with a low thyroid, you might have heavy periods, lots of bleeding, along with low iron as well. Other symptoms of low thyroid, we've got the hair loss, depression that's hard to treat even with an antidepressant. That's a very telltale sign. So knowing what your thyroid is doing is really important to give that healthy ovulation. We're not just ovulating for fertility, we're not just ovulating to create babies. We're actually ovulating to support our own hormone balance and those metabolic hormones, those sex hormones. And so it is to our advantage to ovulate and to get those beautiful hormones. So low thyroid is definitely one to look out for. So you can test your thyroid, and when you test, always get your TSH plus your active thyroid hormones, your T3, your T4, and then get your antibodies done as well. Another condition is polycystic ovarian syndrome. This is a biggie because this does affect many women. And with polycystic ovarian syndrome, you're more likely to have elevated stress hormones, more likely to have elevated insulin, and also more likely to have elevated cortisol. And so this will impact ovulation, and often it will stop ovulation as well. So it can be more difficult to conceive, but you may have more egg follicles sometimes. So some women with polycystic ovarian syndrome have twins. But it can be more difficult to conceive. Now, what polycystic ovarian syndrome can be genetic, can be run in the family. It can be just down to diet, just having too much sugar, having too much processed foods, also having too many refined kind of carbohydrates, and also processed oils, like lots of processed vegetable oils, that can make a difference as well. Normally polycystic ovarian syndrome does have an autoimmune component, so sometimes women also have Hashimoto's, or they have elevated antibodies. So when you've been diagnosed with PCOS, you do want to check your autoimmune antibodies, your ANA, your RA, your thyroid antibodies, just to be sure that's not impacting you, because then it just adds a little bit more complexity to the whole picture. Toxins are a biggie when it comes to polycystic ovarian syndrome. And I do know, working in clinical practice, that women particularly who work around a lot of perfumes or toxins do tend to have an issue with PCOS and hormones. And one of the reasons is because when we are exposed to toxins, whether it's smells, whether it's toxins in the environment, cleaning products, beauty products, that affects two systems in our bodies as well as others like the liver. But two things happen. One, it has been shown to spike your blood glucose, so it affects your blood sugar balance. And two, it's a stress on the body, so it does actually spike your cortisol as well. So a lot of women that are sensitive to toxins do actually have fluctuating blood sugar. So it's good for you to do that. Now, with PCOS, sometimes getting your fasting blood sugar is not enough, because a fasting in the morning might be just fine. You need to know what your blood sugar is after eating, whether you're going into hypo or hyperglycemia, and also what it is through the day. So I suggest doing it yourself. You can either get these monitors that you can buy, and you can actually get them attached medically. And you can also do the pinpricks on your finger just to see what your blood glucose is doing. But I do think it's important to understand what your blood glucose is doing through the day, not just fasting, because sometimes fasting can be a little bit tricky and it won't give us the picture of what's happening. Other conditions associated with polycystic ovarian syndrome, you know, testosterone dominant conditions like blackheads, acne, hirsutism, so growing hair on the chin and here for women, hair loss here, and if you've ever had any scans done, it can be a pearly appearance of the ovaries. They might call it a pearly white appearance. And also some women have polycystic ovaries. So polycystic doesn't necessarily have to be part of the PCOS syndrome, but polycystic ovaries, where you've got all these multiple immature egg follicles waiting and they're kind of just not rupturing. So polycystic ovarian syndrome, I really recommend you look into that. If you do know you're having issues with ovulating, get your bloods done. Check your blood sugars. I think that's the first thing to do. And then just support your diet, minimize the toxins in your environment, but definitely sugar and refined carbs is a biggie. The third thing that's huge, and this is one of the biggest I see, particularly with women that I'm working with when it comes to fertility and trying to conceive, is stress. Stress causes a number of different hormone pathways to disrupt in the body. But one of them being this overproduction of luteinizing hormone, and this overproduction of luteinizing hormone coming from your pituitary. So from our pituitary gland, we have luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone, as well as a lot of other stimulating hormones. Stress does affect our pituitary gland. When stress affects our pituitary gland, it might under or overreact. So, for example, if your TSH or your follicle stimulating hormone is super, super high, this could be a pituitary thing. Doesn't necessarily have to be a thyroid, doesn't necessarily have to be an ovary. This happens with women when they're going through menopause. Extremely high follicle stimulating hormone, and this can cause hot flushes. It could just be a stress issue at the pituitary. And the same with if you're having issues with your cycle, you're having issues with ovulation, the stress can cause your pituitary to overproduce luteinizing hormone. One of the telltale signs, and I do talk about this when I talk about body signs, overproduction of luteinizing hormone and estrogen, but particularly luteinizing hormone, is multiple egg white discharge days. So you're not just getting that one beautiful day where you're ovulating of the egg white discharge, it's happening over multiple days. That's a sign that maybe the luteinizing hormone and or estradiol are too high. So stress can cause that. Stress also depletes our progesterone. So we have this beautiful hormone cascade in the body, progesterone being up near cholesterol, up near DHEA. And when we get stressed, our body funnels progesterone into our stress hormone and our cortisone hormone. And so we get these high stress hormones to deal with the day-to-day stress, but our sex hormones are depleted. And when progesterone is depleted, that can inhibit ovulation. And so that whole cycle starts again, and we get dominant in stress hormones and depleted in progesterone. And another thing stress does is it does cause an imbalance between estrogen and testosterone. So it kind of causes the opposite thing. When I see men going through a lot of stress, that can deplete their testosterone. When I see women go through a lot of stress, you can kind of see that their testosterone can elevate and estrogen can lower. So you kind of see this opposite thing happening. That's just when I've done hormone tests, either the saliva or the Dutch hormone urine test in my clients, just to see what's happening. And it's interesting to see men versus women. So those are the three main things. I mean, there are definitely other things. We've got definitely nutrient deficiencies can affect ovulation, the hormone imbalance, but the hormone imbalance is generally caused by this underlying issue, you know, low thyroid, stress, conditions like polycystic ovarian syndrome. What you need to look out for, as well as testing, what you need to look out for are your body signs and your cycle signs. So it's really important that you track your cycle, know what should be happening when, and just understand why your cycle may be different or why you're getting these body signs. So one of the things I always ask my clients is the egg white discharge. And if you're getting no egg white discharge, that could just mean you're a bit estrogen deficient. It doesn't necessarily mean you're not ovulating. Some women don't get the luteinizing hormone surge, but they're still ovulating. Some women that are super fertile do get a little bit more of that egg white discharge, but if it's over multiple days, what that tells me is it's telling me that the ovulation is just not going ahead. It's not producing the progesterone, and the progesterone actually helps to dry up that area. So that's why it kind of changes in that latter half of your cycle. Another thing some women will get is the spotting. This is a biggie, that kind of spotting before your period. You know, that tells us either there's not enough progesterone produced, or maybe there's too much and your hormones just aren't dropping. Your estradiol and your progesterone just aren't dropping. That's the spotting. Cycle length is a huge giveaway. And cycle length is a biggie because if you've got a short cycle, you're just getting your menstrual cycle, you know, every 10 to 14 days. And that can be really depleting on the body. If you're getting a shorter cycle, that can mean shorter cycles. We're looking at more estrogen dominance. So that estrogen is happening constantly. And that's telling us if it's a shorter cycle, then they're less likely to be ovulating and you're less likely to be producing progesterone. The longer your cycle gets, we've got then a couple of hormones at play. So if your cycle's getting to 30, 35, 40, 45 days, we're looking at maybe elevated testosterone, but also we're looking at low progesterone. So sometimes regulating your cycle, and if your cycle is really going on, you know, to that 40 days, it's really difficult to know if you're ovulating and when you're ovulating. And so you might be ovulating super late. You might have a luteal phase defect. Your luteal phase might be really, really super long, or it might be really short. And if your luteal phase is short, that does make it more difficult to conceive. So always track your cycle length. Try and pinpoint where you're ovulating. Try and pinpoint where you're having these hormone fluctuations. So the best way to do that, you can do the P-sticks, the luteinizing hormone. You can test your follicle stimulating hormone. You can get bloods or saliva for your progesterone and your estradiol, and you test them at particular times. You can test your follicle stimulating and your luteinizing by your bloods at the start of your cycle, you know, around that day 5. And you can see, are they too high, are they too low, are they just right? Just right, you know, your pituitary is doing its job there. You can then test your hormones again on day 21. That tells you, you know, are you ovulating? Is that all happening? You can also do the luteinizing hormone P-sticks from about day 10 for a few days, just to see where you're having that surge. That's a good way to check if you're ovulating. And of course, just having that kind of regular cycle, that egg white discharge, and then having a pretty simple kind of luteal phase does give you an indication that you're ovulating. The reason being, thinking about your moods, is the ovulation does have an impact on moods, particularly if you're not ovulating. So if you're not ovulating and producing that progesterone is a calming hormone. It helps you relax, puts you to sleep, boosts serotonin, boosts GABA. So it makes you feel all lovely. And if you're not feeling that, or if you're not ovulating and progesterone's not rising, you're more likely to feel anxious. You're more likely to get insomnia. You're more likely to have also body signs like excessive water retention, because progesterone is a natural diuretic. You know, when you're pregnant, at the start of your pregnancy, you're wanting to pee all the time. And if you're holding on to this fluid, that is an indication that you've got that lower progesterone. So look out for those body signs and really tune into how you're feeling. You know, when do you feel best in your cycle? Do you feel amazing when you ovulate? If you feel amazing when you ovulate, that tells us the rest of your cycle, your hormones are probably on the little low side. Maybe your estradiol's on the low side. You ovulate, you feel fantastic. Do you feel extremely anxious? Do you feel extremely agitated, moody, ovulation onwards? That tells us that you possibly could be estrogen dominant and low in progesterone. So look out for those mental and emotional symptoms as well as the physical. The physical is, you know, that longer cycle. Another sign that you might not be ovulating as well is ovarian cysts that rupture. So the follicle can actually grow from ovulation and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then sometime around kind of that day 22, 23, 24, you might find you have extreme pain, which can actually sometimes be that ovarian cyst rupture. So if you have a history of those, I've had those before. And it's quite interesting, the symptoms. So the symptoms for me, I had them because I had low progesterone, and I have had an ovarian cyst in the past that I had removed in 2002. But what happened to me a few times, ovulation would occur, and then from ovulation I'd get a bit bloated, then you get a little bit constipated, and then you would get this severe pain, and that rupture is kind of like a pass out pain. You feel so nauseous from it. It's happened to me about 3 times in my life. You feel so nauseous because the pain is so severe. So that can be a sign of that rupture, and those are those hormone imbalances. So you do need to then look at that progesterone and also your thyroid health. If your thyroid is low, it's going to really impede your eggs doing their job and actually having that kind of healthy, strong ovulation. And remember what I mentioned earlier, ovulation's not just about conception. Ovulation is about providing you with the hormones you need for good hormone balance, good mental health, good well-being, anti-aging, all of those beautiful things. That's why it's important. So really when we're looking at regulating ovulation, when we're looking at supporting ourselves, it's best to just get back to basics at first. Get back to what you know about the diet. You know, take excess sugars out of the diet. Take out your refined carbs. Take out your overcooked meats. So we know that too much refined fructose. We know that overcooked meats. We know that vegetable oils that have been really processed, they cause AGEs, which is advanced glycation end products. These are really inflammatory on your ovaries and your eggs, really, really inflammatory. So just be careful there, because any kind of insulin spike, inflammation that's happening down in your eggs, that can also halt ovulation as well. Remove any trigger foods. Now, I know everyone talks about removing gluten and removing dairy, but if there's anything going on, particularly polycystic ovarian syndrome, estrogen dominance, heavy painful periods, Hashimoto's, anything to do with your autoimmune system, if you've got high antibodies, you do need to look at giving up dairy and gluten, because for a lot of people they will raise your antibodies even if you're not intolerant to them. This is just part of this kind of immune system reaction. Another way you can, and I've done this for myself, is you can support progesterone through chaste tree. Chaste tree is a beautiful herb that works at stimulating the pituitary. It raises dopamine levels. But with chaste tree, there is a caveat. You know, if you're super, super estrogen dominant, or you have lots and lots of luteinizing hormone, chaste tree can cause a little bit more luteinizing hormone. So you need to see a practitioner, but you really need to pay attention to your symptoms. Do you feel brilliant on chaste tree, relaxed? Do you feel happy? Do you feel more yourself? Does it start to regulate your cycle? Perfect, tick, it's good for you. Try not to take it longer than 3 months. Do you feel a bit anxious and agitated? Well, maybe you've got high dopamine already, so it's raising your dopamine, or it's raising your luteinizing hormone, it's making you feel worse. Just because it's wonderful for the majority, it doesn't mean it's great for everybody. And if you've got polycystic ovarian syndrome, you can go one way or the other with chaste tree. So please just be aware of that. You'll know pretty quickly. You'll know really quick if it's the right thing for you. For me, it's wonderful, it worked. Another thing I've also used, which I loved, is bioidentical progesterone cream. So I've used that. and I flitted between them, and I found the bioidentical progesterone cream. I used Plat Wellness cream from Canada, a really good micronized kind of brand. I've got a video talking about this, talking about the ones to look out for. For me, it worked really well. You don't necessarily have to take the full dose, but it helped with boosting my progesterone levels, which sometimes just drop. They just drop over time. Mine do, personally. If I get stressed, if I'm not looking after myself, I have a tendency to have sort of like lower sex hormones, and also a tendency to have higher testosterone. My body just naturally higher testosterone. So sometimes I do that just to support my health, but you can see a practitioner about that. But so you can use progesterone cream, or you can use Vitex Chase Tree to support. Those both support a good ovulation. Testing your hormones is one of the best ways to do it. Reading the body signs, a long cycle, a short cycle. If it's too long, you know, excess testosterone, low progesterone. If it's super short, you might be estrogen dominant. So looking at your cycle, that will give you a lot of indication what's going on with your ovulation and what might be causing your signs and symptoms. If it is a shorter cycle, you know, tackle the excess estrogen by cleansing. The root cause of excess estrogen could be stress, could be low thyroid, could be MTHFR, could be genetic. There are lots of different things that could cause it. And then kind of do, if you want to do that complete approach, if you know it's anovulation, if you just know you're not ovulating at all, then you want to do that complete approach. You want to look at your diet, you want to manage your stress levels, you want to test your thyroid and manage that. Also your immune system, just make sure there's no autoimmune components. And then lastly, don't neglect your nutrient levels. Your nutrient levels are really important. Iron, for example, is a cofactor for your thyroid. So if you're low in iron or low in ferritin, that could be affecting your thyroid health. If you're low in vitamin D, that might be affecting your ovulation. If you're low in cholesterol, that might be affecting your ovulation. Zinc as well. So get all these tested, get your micronutrients tested, do the general bloods, and that will just help give you an overview of, is there anything missing? And lastly, the thing I do love for ovulation that I've found has helped a lot of women, and if you think this is an issue, particularly due to low thyroid, the one nutrient that I just find fantastic is L-acetylcarnitine. So I just find that helps to stimulate the ovarian reserve, helps to support an ovulation. It supports your energy at a mitochondrial level. And for someone that's got anovulation, you know, you could be looking at actually getting an ovulation within a few months. So it can be very, very helpful. I hope that helped. Just give an overview about your ovulation and how that can affect your mood, and particularly when you're not ovulating, the signs and symptoms to look out for. And even if you know you are ovulating, still look out for things. Are you feeling anxious after ovulation? Are you getting angry and agitated? Because if it's happening around that time, it normally means estrogen dominance. So look for signs and symptoms, get tested if that's available to you. And then just go through each of those body systems to start to get your hormones in balance. I hope that helped. If you've got any questions, please pop them below, and I will be seeing you next week. So have a fantastic week, ladies, and I'll talk to you all soon. Bye.